So we're gonna go ahead and just start demoing. Um, First things first, I always look for that flow of the figure. I like to take a second to look at what the model's doing, or just like try to get a feel for the pose. And I remember at the start of this pose, there's that nice little gesture or tilt of the head. And then back here, I like to go off center line. And center line is just the middle point of the figure. This is gonna be where the rib cage is. So, all right, so I found that tilt of the head right in here, and that center line of the back. Now the pelvis always naturally juts out from underneath the rib cage, and that center line usually is a direct counter to what the back is doing. We can still assume that the pelvis comes out, and that's a reliable assumption because everybody has the same skeleton. Everybody has the same basic buildup. And I went off of, for the legs, I went off of that back leg, because that back leg kind of juts out a little bit, right? And this is a way of gauging proportion off rip, right? And the next thing I went into is the gesture of the tilts of the body. So that's the gesture of the rib cage, that's the top of the rib cage in there, and then the gesture of the pelvis in here. So this is a basic structure. So we have a little bit of what's going on. I remember taking a look at that leg. It kind of comes back up, and this leg comes down here, right? Now I'm gonna use a bit of a mixture of mass and line. So right now this is line working in here. And what I mean by mass is putting in certain shadow shapes. And there's a big shadow shape in the leg here. And the entire leg is not covered in shadow, but overstating your shadows will allow you to draw out the light later. So I'm gonna go ahead, put that in there, right? And then her entire head was in shadow here. And when you're working on proportion, and you're trying to get the accuracy of the model, using these shapes and even the light shapes as well as a gauge will help your proportion building as the drawing develops. Right, so remember, we're still sticking with this center line. The arm came out here. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna just remove this a little bit. Just remove a little bit. I'm gonna put this arm in here because that matches up with like the top of the head. What this line represents is this arm, or this part of the arm coming to the back. I'm gonna put that leg in there. You can tell this is a bit more gestural than that was, but in order to get the accuracy of this figure here, you want to push certain gestural things here. And what I mean by push is sort of make it larger than life, right? More, you want to enhance it more than what you see. So we're going to go ahead and put that head in. That shoulder comes out here. She had this arm over here, right? This trap comes up in here. You're gonna see the legs look a little long, so I'm just gonna plant the feet a little bit, right? I'm gonna put this arm in shadow in here. Now she has a little slight tilt. You can't really tell, but there's a slight tilt in here, and the more figure drawings you do, the more recognizable they become. And the reason she has this tilt in here is because there's a tilt this way. There's that little tilt of the shoulders. I'm pushing it further than what I see, and naturally the hips will counter that. So if this is the head here, this is the rib cage here, that pelvis comes back out here, and then you have your legs planted. It's exactly the flow that I copied here. That's the tilt of the head, tilt of the rib cage, tilt of the pelvis, planting that leg. I love figure drawing. I've fallen in love with this process, and it's because I can learn about humans in a way. You know, this arm comes out a little bit, and this is a little bit straighter than what I have it. This comes out a little bit more. I love learning about people, physically, spiritually, socially, you know. There's a lot that goes on, and I'm unafraid to explore. So what am I looking for now that I've reached this point of the drawing? I have a very basic, I threw this up here, and I got a good idea of what I'm seeing over here. What I usually look for at this stage are proportions. So proportions of the shadows. Am I getting that gesture right? Maybe this needs to come up a little bit. I remember I put the shadow all the way up here. When I was doing this, I put that shadow all the way up here because there's a lot of dark light in here. And this is the accurate shadow that I saw, but because I overstated the shadow up to here, I was able to draw out that light. Being able to draw out that light, I'm able to think about the anatomy and how it affects the surface of the skin. So yeah, I drew that out with my paper towel. I was able to draw out different areas, thinking about the anatomy. Same thing up here. I overstated that shadow all the way up to here. And you see how much is actually in the light. That's me being able to just scoop that out, just sculpt it a little bit. So I want to overstate my shadows. It's okay. You're gonna go through an ugly stage with every drawing. It's just what happens. You have to trust the process a little bit. And this shadow comes down in here. Now these are just abstract shapes. The best way to describe what you're looking at is using these shapes. The best way to gain the accuracy of what you're looking at is manipulating the shapes. And this is like the beginning. This is just the beginning. So you don't really have to worry about going into detail. You don't have to worry about anatomy just yet. I think about it a little bit because I'm just me. But I know, here, I'll give you an example. So this is my pelvis in here. The tilt is this way, right? This is my pelvis. This is the middle of the pelvis in here. That's that center line that follows all the way up through the figure. What kind of anatomical knowledge can I apply to this box? Well, in here, there's a little bit of a dark light, right? And there's that little shadow. That little shadow tells me that the great trochanter, that's that little ball that hooks into your hip. That's where it comes out. And the reason why I know that is because the great trochanter pulls on the skin. If this is the surface of my skin, this is the great trochanter. It pulls that skin in, and with the way the light casts, creates this shadow because the top of that skin is blocking the light from coming under. But I don't have to apply that until later. I'm just thinking about it now because I'm a chronic overthinker. Yippee. I remember that line that I drew comes all the way through the middle of the head. So if I follow that down, this is where it lands. All right? And that also means I can push this arm a little thinner right in here. So I can create a mass on the outside of the skin to help me gain the accuracy on the inside. And that's using this light mass as a way to gauge proportion. So I can go ahead and make it a little bit more accurate here. So what am I going to look for now? Well, let's go ahead and start shaping up that head a little bit. All right. Let's go ahead and solidify that in there. And I got told by my teacher today that you have to, at some point, just you make a decision, basically, and solidify something as a reference. You know, because you can't move forward if you don't have something to go off of in the beginning. So you just have to just make a decision sometimes and stick with it. And if that decision is wrong, find out why it's wrong and correct it. This shoulder was a little bit straighter. This shoulder came down a little bit more. Now I'm thinking about how these traps are affected or affect the neck in here. So in this here, because this is my gesture, that's a little bit slanted down. This is gonna look like it slopes more, and this is gonna look a little straighter. And that's just the way that the traps work and in this position. So here, let's go ahead and get some more paint on my brush. So that's gonna come up a little bit. This is gonna be just slightly straighter, and maybe my head is a little small. So we're gonna make that just a tiny bit bigger. That looks about right. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to get my light masses out of the shadow. You have this shape in here. Oh, my finger's popping through. Huh? And you have this shape. Now, I didn't really put a light or a shadow in here to pull out, but I can still get an accurate gauge at where that knee is. So we have this nice abstraction. What am I looking for? What am I looking for at this stage of the drawing? My proportions are pretty accurate. Maybe it's a little thicker. I think it's a little bit more well-informed than my initial drawing. Probably because I already drew it, but hey, that's okay. What do these light shapes tell me? Those are upward facing planes. Because the light, we know that because the light hits it, and the shadow shapes are facing away from the light. I think we're ready to draw out the lights within the shadow shapes. How are we going to do that? So this is the part where I start thinking about anatomy. Up here in the back, you have your trapezius that comes in. It goes into the neck here, comes down over, I don't know, like all of it, but your trapezius comes down this way and connects to your acromion process. Now that acromion process is the top of the shoulder. That's gonna be right about here. In the drawing, you can see it. That's where that acromion process is. And this light in here, that is where the scapula, it's this bony plate in there, that's where the scapula kind of juts forward or towards the viewer. And that light catches because there's a plane shift, and that's able to catch the light. But I know that that acromion process is right about here, and that scapula kind of comes down. So I'm going to draw out that scapula in here. It doesn't go that far down, but I remember that there was this light that went all the way down. And this is part of the anatomy. It starts off with the scapula and then goes in with the fold of the skin. That trapezius comes up, over, goes into the neck, as you can see right in here. So I'm going to pull out some of that light to represent where that trapezius is. I'm gonna push this just a tiny bit so I can show you where that trap comes up on the other side. Push that down just a little bit. And this acromion process is right around here. So the front of that face kind of lines up with that acromion process in there. And I can make a little mark just to tell me where that is. That's already a lot more descriptive of the figure that I'm seeing than it was before. And I know that this light mass right in here, that's the top of that other trapezius. This one's in shadow, or in the dark light, really. This trapezius is in the dark light because it's falling away from the light. This is where the light hits, and naturally, this goes away. Now you have this light mass in here, which is one of the high points, one of the highlights. I'm going to pull that out. And this is where the skin folds and comes around underneath the lat muscle in there. I'm going to pull that out. I'm just gonna pull this. I'm going to overstate the shadow in here because I think this comes out a little bit more than what I had it at. And that allows me some space to pull out the lights in here. And that's, again, just like some skin folds. I believe that the figure is one of the most complicated things that we can even look at or think of. Here we go. We're going to pull that out just a little bit more. Right? Now, pulling out the light in the direction of the anatomy will help you think of it in that way. It helps you think of it in that form kind of sense. So like in here, this is our gluteus maximus. Now the glutes, they tend to come in towards each other. That the gluteus maximus attaches to the gluteus medius, which is right here. Right. And there's that little dark spot where the great trochanter is. That's where it attaches. I'm gonna pull this out, and I'm not just pulling out a random light here. I'm thinking of like where that line, this shadow, lines up. So that shadow lines up right where the elbow is. So I'm gonna think of it in that way. There's this beautiful math when it comes to building the figure. It's like an actual architect designed human beings. And however you look at a person, there's going to be some correlation of that person anywhere on the body to another part of the body. Like the front of that head matches up with the back of that heel. I could reference that. I can push this head in just a little bit to match up where that heel is. I can get a much more accurate representation of what I'm looking at. And I know that pushes the back of the head just a little bit. And I remember because she had a ponytail that came down, so that kind of pushed this shape back, which is fine. It's fine. I'm getting more accurate as I go along. And that's the whole point. When we look at this shadow shape in here, where does that line up? Right above where the elbow hits here. So I'm going to pull that out, and I know that this is where this light shape is. It's like the edge of the hips there. And I know that the glutes kind of go in and down, in and down. And I can pull that out. Right in there. And I can pull this out because that was also in light. I'm pulling it towards the direction that the anatomy goes in. That just lends itself to the form. You understand how thinking of the anatomy can inform your drawing? Now, as I'm looking at this, I'm noticing that the proportions are just a little bit off. Just a little bit off. Could be a little thicker in here. A little wider. Bring that down just a little bit. Right. I think that's already much more accurate than what I had it. There's a shadow shape in here where the light doesn't reach. I can bring this in, push the accuracy of that just a little bit, right? And that also informs where this calf is. I can push that in. That's where the front of that shin kind of hits. Could probably push this a little further down so you get that a little bit more accurate. So I remember this is a little bit up, a little bit up. Remember the tilt is this way, not this way. So we want to make sure that everything represents that tilt. You don't have to use lines all the time. Using this method allows you to use like just values against each other to create a line. And that line is exactly where I need it to be. It's not a line that I placed in there. It's a line created by the separation of the values. It would be at this point that I would, make it just a little bit more accurate, find those areas that need correction, and I would probably move on to building in the values in the light. I really like doing this because it helps me to gauge where my knowledge is, and it helps me to think about how to develop that figure in future drawings, future paintings, whatever it may be. Hopefully I can save this video and post it to my account. Thank you guys for joining. Love you all. Have a great day.